One of the most common questions I get asked is, how often should I weightlift or strength train for X when I am a Y athlete? And obviously the answer to this is not as simple as a number. There are just too many variables to determine these things. This video will hopefully help you understand the broader concepts that can determine your ideal frequency of training. So in this session, Adam and I have the same goal in mind. We both feel pretty trashed from the fatigue generated from earlier in the week. In Adam's case, he had very heavy Olympic lifts and strength training movements like pulls and squats. And in my case, I had a little bit less fatigue from the lifts and a decent amount from jiu-jitsu. Either way, I was not feeling very good going into this session. So we had both determined we would take a typically lighter lift, the power snatch, and build weight to a respectable set of 3, something that looks good but felt a little bit challenging. This choice of movement takes into account one major factor, the stimulus, recovery, and adaptation curve, or simply put, SRA. When you do any sort of training, it elicits some sort of response in the body that would then cause it to recover and then adapt and then be ready for next session. If we look at the x-axis as performance and the y-axis as time, we can see that while we're training or introducing our stimulus, we are hitting our peak in performance and peak in stimulus. Then immediately after, our performance trends downward into the recovery phase, where our performance will actually become weaker than before we had trained in the first place. However, once we have fully recovered, hopefully, we can begin the process again at a slightly higher baseline than before. This way, we can increase our strength as we go through a cycle of training. With SRA, some movements will have a longer SRA process than others. Usually those that require the most force and muscle groups and intensity for overload purposes will have the longest SRA curve. However, the opposite will happen with lighter movements. The lighter movements will have a shorter SRA curve. Also, the intensity of the loading per movement can determine SRA as well. A max effort deadlift will surely elicit a longer SRA process than a maximum effort muscle snatch. Also, dynamic or lighter effort deadlifts will elicit a shorter SRA process than a maximum one. Knowing the above information, Adam and I determined our work-off based off of these assessments. We needed a lighter relative load to other full body movements. When we compare the deadlift to the power snatch, my best deadlift is 280 kilos and my best power snatch ever is around 125 kilos. That's a substantially lower load for the power snatch than the deadlift. We were also looking for a movement that requires more technical skill and explosive power, which would make it impossible to grind or slowly lift. These are both two ideas of performance that will limit the amount of weight on the bar. So our expectations of creating physiological stress through overload were very low for this session. However, as we kept moving, we felt good and our movements remained crisp. We ended up actually working up to a near all-time best power snatch in this session, but even then, the relative load was light. So let's go back to the question, how often should we weightlift? And the answer is simply as many times that can elicit a physiological stress through overload if, and this is a big if, we do not try to elicit those stressors while we are recovering. Had Adam and I decided to do a heavy back squat or clean and jerk or deadlift workout, we would be ignoring our prior SRA curves and we would pretty much be spinning our wheels, making zero improvements, and increasing our risk of injury. So as another example, let's say you train total body every time you go to the gym. And not only do you train total body, you are searching for overload. So last week you did 100 pounds for 5 reps. This week you are going to do more than 100 pounds for 5 reps. Every time you go into the gym, you are looking to improve. Once you gain experience and once you build up resistance to training, it's likely that you'll only be able to fit 2 or 3 hard sessions like this in per week. So the answer could be 2 or 3 times a week. However, knowing what we do now about SRA, you can fit in the lessened SRA sessions in between those, much like the session that Adam and I are having in this video. Adam or myself could train 3 times a week if every training session was very, very difficult. However, Adam and I pretty much train 7 days a week. And right away, people will think this is crazy and ask how can you do something like that? How can you recover? And the answer is simple. You undulate the intensity of your training sessions so you can still recover even on lighter days. Even though we could train 2 to 3 times a week, we train more than that, upwards of 7 times a week, because in this way we're able to practice the movements while still mitigating fatigue, and we are able to keep moving and keep blood flow going into the muscles. That will aid in recovery. So my suggestion is to always let the quality of the movement determine the workout. If you had maximal back squats on Monday, it's likely that the quality of maximal back squats you perform for the next few days will be bad. So you should either pick a different exercise or change up the load or rep scheme. So guys, the principle of SRA and many other concepts that are essential in knowing to understand how to program and implement strength training are in the best book around called The Scientific Principles of Strength Training. This book and many more are located at jtsstrength.com. Buy anything at the shop and use my code ZACH for 10% off. Thank you for watching.